bought this entire drum kit for just £10, and in this video I'm going to set it up for the first time, record it, and then sell it to see if I can make back 10 times my investment. Before we set it up though, I'd like to give you some context. Here you can see me loading the drums out of a white BMW, and that's because I wasn't actually the one who picked them up. The kit was located in Epsom, south of London, which would have meant almost a 7-hour round trip for me, costing around £50 in fuel and making the whole thing far less of a bargain. Fortunately for me though, my brother happens to live not too far from Epsom, and he was coming up this way anyway, so we met at this McDonald's car park just outside of Birmingham to do the exchange, and I made sure to wear my best tracksuit and hoodie to make sure that I blended in. Pair of stick there would have been a tenner. Look at that. You may notice that my bass drum here doesn't have a batter side skin, but that's okay because the kit actually came with this cardboard box, inside of which has a couple of skins, including the 22-inch bass drum skin. It's strange that CB used to put the logo on both the batter and the resonance side of the bass drum skin. The story is with this kit that it was dismantled about 20 years ago, and it's just never been put back together. The seller told me that it's been stored in a garage, but it must have been stored pretty well because there were no signs of rust, there were no signs of damp or anything like that. It was just a little bit dusty really, and they must have been pretty meticulous because all of the tension bolts and all of the wing nuts that had been removed were all actually with the drum. Now, when I say they were all with the drum, there were a couple of small issues, but we'll solve those in a minute. First of all, let me give you a brief history on CB drums. It's actually far more interesting than I could have ever imagined. The name CB originally belonged to Charles Bruno, who was born in Saxony, Germany in 1806. Charles emigrated to the United States in 1832, spending 2 years first of all in Georgia before eventually setting up shop in New York as a musical instrument manufacturer, specialising mainly in brass and woodwind instruments. Charles Sr. passed away in 1884 and the company was passed down to his son Charles Jr., where they continued to make brass, woodwind and string instruments for about the next 70 years or so. But it seems that things changed during the rock and roll boom of the 1950s, where, as far as I can tell, they decided to branch out into making drums. Seemingly due to the huge surge in demand for domestic drum manufacturing at the time. Although they began selling drums in the very late 50s or possibly the early 1960s, they didn't in fact make them in-house. Instead, they commissioned the drums to be made on their behalf. And for this next bit, I need to thank somebody who commented on the short I made when I actually bought this kit, who said something along the lines of, "Oh, you've basically got a Pearl Forum kit there for £10. To be honest, I didn't know there was any kind of connection, but it seems that things went down like this. CB wanted to make drums, but they didn't have a way of making them in-house, and at the same time, Pearl in particular was eager to manufacture drums for export from Japan, and that's how CB ended up with Pearl-built kits early on. It turns out that CB were actually responsible for one of the most iconic snare drum designs in history. According to this article I found on reverb.com, they developed a method for outfitting the snare hardware without penetrating the drum shell itself, increasing sustain and resonance. And Pearl took a liking to this and licensed it for their own use, creating the free-floating Pearl shell. But it was actually the free-floating CB shell originally. The kit that I have here is of course a much later example. It's from their SP range, which is another budget-friendly model. They mainly made budget-friendly drums, and I believe it was made during the time that they were owned by the Kaman Music Corporation, I believe that's how you pronounce it, who also distributed brands such as Toca and later LP, or Latin Percussion, among others. We'll get to that in just a second. And I just couldn't leave out the fact that the founder of the Kaman Music Corporation, Charles H. Kaman, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was also an aerospace engineer, and he was the founder of Kaman Aircraft. He was a pioneer in helicopter design, and it's recorded that in the second half of the 20th century, Kaman helicopters saved more than 15,000 lives, with the Kaman H-43 or Husky flying more successful rescue missions during the Korean and Vietnam Wars than all other helicopters combined, remaining the only military helicopter in history to serve throughout its service life with no loss of life or accidents attributed to its design. Which is probably why, when Charles Caman, who just happened to be a full-on guitar nerd, applied his knowledge of the aerospace industry and his understanding of particularly sound and vibration to the manufacture of guitars, he came up with the Ovation guitar brand, which have a unique sort of rounded bowl-shaped back, which is actually made from aerospace-derived fiberglass composite. Anyway, let's get back to this drum kit, shall we? All I had to do to make this kit fully set up were to replace one tension bolt, which was missing. Fortunately, I had a donor drum, which I could take that from. And there was also a wing nut missing from the hi-hat stand, which I've actually just put some gaffer tape around instead, because I just don't seem to have one that fits. The only other thing to mention was that it didn't seem to come with a cymbal stand, but strangely enough, from my last video about the Mapex Meridian Maple kit, I actually had a CB Drums straight stand. I actually used it to hold the little Zildjian Z3 12-inch splash cymbal that was in that video. Because I sold the Meridian kit without that stand, I still had it and I hadn't put it on Marketplace yet. It's only worth a tenner really to somebody. So I've actually stolen it for this video. So that's the only thing that I've had to add to this kit from my £10 value. I used to work in a second-hand drum shop and we used to deal in a lot of what we called starter kits. You know, the kind of thing, Session Pro, Aria, Boston, all those kind of makes. We always felt like the CB Drums kits were just that little bit better made than a lot of the other starter kits. I remember we used to price them at like another kind of 20 or 30 pounds because we just felt like, for whatever reason, they were just that little bit better. I always felt like the wrap was quite well finished and that the lug boxes felt pretty good and everything went together in a kind of nice way. You even get memory locks on the tom holders, which you didn't on a lot of the starter kits, and you know, just the brackets themselves seem to fit together nicely. Where it does suffer, and where you can tell that it is still a cheap drum kit, apart from the fact that it's not made of any kind of wood that would be of note, is the fact that it doesn't have many lug boxes per drum. And the reason that this is a drawback is because when you're trying to tune the drum, it means that each lug box is doing more of the work. This is a Mapex Black Panther that I bought yesterday actually, and this is a 10 lug drum, which means per side you've got 10 lug boxes. So each lug box, of course, it's going to be better quality and the metal's going to be stronger and all that kind of stuff, but also each one's going to be doing far less of the work than on this 6 lug snare drum that I've got here. It also means that the distance between the points of tension is much smaller, which means that the tension is actually going to carry and be more even. Also, of course, on a better quality drum, the hoops are going to be much stronger, there's going to be less flex in them. That said, it's kind of back to the same old story really, which is that it comes a lot down to the skins. I would happily take this on a gig, and I think that with good skins, I could get it to sound pretty good. Hilariously today, I'm using about £2,500 to £3,000 worth of microphones to record a drum kit that I paid £10 for, and I know, of course, the cymbals are going to be terrible, but I am going to try my best to get a good sound out of the toms and the snare drum, and if I can't, then it definitely won't be down to the microphones. It's also worth mentioning that with this kit I got some cymbal silencers and a full set of these mesh skins. I've got every single one there for the whole kit. And there was a price on the box of £20 new, so I can't imagine they're the best in the world, but I've got everything basically that I would need to turn this into a practice kit, which is great. So when I sell the kit, these can go with it. Brilliant. So it's been a couple of weeks since I sold the CB kit, and of course I did manage to get my £100 target for it, meaning that I 10 times my money, making it pound for pound the best deal that I've ever had buying and selling drums on the internet. I'll be back in a fortnight with some more drum content. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye for now.